I've been in a lot of uncomfortable rooms in my life, but nothing quite like sitting in a team meeting, watching your own boss tell 12 people why they shouldn't trust you. Not behind your back, right in front of you. She just cut me off mid-sentence, waved her hand, and said, "That's not how we handle things here, Nolan. Let's move on." No explanation, no pushback on the actual point, just a dismissal, and I sat there and said nothing, not because I was scared, because I needed her to keep doing it. My name is Nolan. I'm 50 years old. And what I'm about to tell you took 6 months, a lot of bad coffee, and one 26-year-old who refused to mind her own business. Let me back up. I've spent 17 years studying workplace ethics, not the kind they print on a poster and hang in the break room, the real kind, the kind that shows you how normal people, in normal jobs, end up doing things that hurt other people without ever thinking of themselves as the bad guy. I've interviewed thousands of workers, entry-level, C-suite, everything in between. Same patterns show up every time. Doesn't matter the industry. Doesn't matter the state, the patterns repeat. About 14 years in, I wrote a book about it. Wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just putting what I'd found on paper. But then MBA programs started assigning it. Regulatory agencies started referencing it in investigations. Universities built courses around it. Suddenly, my name meant something in professional circles. My name from before I got married, that is. When I took my wife's last name, I got something I didn't expect. Nobody knew who I was anymore. I could walk into any company as a regular employee, and people just saw a guy doing a job. No one connected the name on my badge to the book on their syllabus, that anonymity is worth more than any consulting fee. So when I decided to write a second book, I knew what I had to do. Go inside a real organization, not as an outside observer, not as a consultant everyone performs for, as an actual employee, someone unremarkable, someone who blends in and sees everything exactly as it is. I found a client services firm, about 180 people, mid-sized, nothing dramatic about it. The kind of place where most careers happen quietly. I applied for a role handling client complaints and employee concerns. That type of job gives you access to every crack in the foundation. The director, Owen Hartley, had built the company over 20 years. Smart guy. He understood immediately what I was proposing and approved it with one condition. Only my direct manager would know who I was. She would know. No one else. He introduced me to Brenda, mid-40s, always put together. Firm handshake, warm smile. We sat in Owen's office, all three of us, and I explained the project. She nodded the whole way through. Said, "Your secret is safe with me." This kind of research benefits everyone. I believed her. That was my first mistake. Week 1 was fine. People introduced themselves, showed me how things worked, invited me to lunch. I thought this might actually be easier than I expected. Week 2, something changed. Conversations stopped when I walked up. People who'd been friendly suddenly had somewhere to be. The group chat went quiet every time I opened it. I went back through every interaction in my head trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Nothing. There was nothing. Month 3, I got my answer. I was in the break room a little early. 2 new hires came in talking. Didn't see me. One of them said, "Did Brenda say anything to you about Nolan?" The other nodded. "Yeah." Said he doesn't work well with others. Said he causes problems. They noticed me. The conversation stopped. They grabbed their drinks and left. I stood there holding my coffee and understood exactly what was happening. Brenda wasn't protecting my secret. She was using me. She'd figured out fast that having a workplace ethics researcher sitting inside her department was a problem. I could see everything she did wrong, every shortcut, every policy she bent, because fixing it was inconvenient. Every time she told someone what they wanted to hear instead of the truth, so she did the smart thing. She made sure that if I ever raised anything, nobody would listen. You want to neutralize someone without confronting them, label them, difficult, doesn't collaborate, causes problems. Now anything they say sounds like complaining. Any concern they raise sounds like drama. It's clean, it's quiet, and it works. She assigned me every sensitive task in the department. Client complaints threatening legal action, employee concern reports covering harassment, discrimination, safety issues, financial discrepancies flagged by other teams. I was reading everything, seeing everything, and influencing nothing. Nobody collaborated with me, nobody checked my work, nobody asked my opinion. In weekly team meetings, Brenda spent 30 minutes recognizing everyone's contributions. Projects went to people with 3 months of experience. Strategic work went to someone who openly said they were figuring it out as they went. I sat there and said nothing, because speaking up would only confirm what everyone already believed about me. Then month 4 happened. We were in a team meeting, about 12 people in the room. I raised an issue. A client contract had been modified without documentation, the kind of thing that creates real legal exposure down the line. Before I finished my second sentence, Brenda cut me off. That's not how we handle things here, Nolan. Let's move on. No explanation, no counter-argument, just a dismissal in front of the whole team. I wrote it down that night, date, time, who was in the room. I kept a documentation file the entire time I was there. Not every single thing I saw, but the clearest examples of each pattern: 4 financial discrepancies with timestamps and names attached, 2 safety violations that had been formally reported and then quietly ignored, 3 client contracts modified without any paper trail. I picked the cases that were most clear-cut, most documented, least deniable. I also prepared something else. A summary that could go to OSHA for the safety violations and to the SEC for the financial discrepancies if it ever came to that. I wasn't planning to send it. It was insurance. The kind you hope you never need but you're glad you have. One coworker, Dana, stopped me in the hallway one afternoon. She said it kindly, like she was doing me a favor. Don't take it personally. Brenda told us you don't collaborate easily. It's just your work style. She meant well. I thanked her and kept walking. What was I supposed to say, that I'd literally written the textbook on collaborative leadership? That would sound exactly like what a difficult person would say. So I kept working, I kept watching, I kept writing things down. Because here's what Brenda didn't understand about research. Isolation is sometimes the best seat in the house. When you're not part of the social dynamics, you see them more clearly. When people forget you're there, they stop performing. 6 months in, Paige showed up. 26 years old, fresh out of grad school, hired for client onboarding. She had this way of asking questions that made people actually think instead of just respond. On her 3rd day, she appeared next to my desk. Why does everyone avoid you? No small talk, no warm-up. Just the question. You'd have to ask them, I said, not looking up from my screen. I did. They said you're difficult. She paused. But I've been watching you for 3 days. You helped 4 different people solve problems they were stuck on. You caught a database error yesterday that would have cost us a major account. You stayed until 7 finishing someone's report because they had a family emergency. That doesn't look difficult to me. That looks like the opposite of difficult. I looked up at her. She wasn't trying to be nice. She wasn't running some kind of new employee diplomacy. She was just genuinely confused about why what she'd been told didn't match what she was seeing. What's actually going on, she asked. I shook my head. It's complicated. She looked at me for another moment. Then she packed up her bag and walked out of the building. It was 2 in the afternoon. I figured that was that. Another person who tried to understand decided it wasn't worth the trouble and moved on. I was completely wrong. She didn't go home. She went straight to Owen's office building, 3 blocks away, walked past reception, took the elevator to the 4th floor, knocked on his door. Owen had been back from 7 months of overseas work for less than 2 weeks. He barely knew most of the people hired while he was gone. But before he left, he'd already had a complaint file started on Brenda. 2 employees had raised concerns about her management style through HR while he was away. He hadn't had time to act on it yet, but it was sitting on his desk when Paige walked in. So when a new hire showed up unannounced and told him something was wrong in Brenda's department, he didn't dismiss it. He listened. Paige didn't waste his time. She pulled out her phone and showed him what she'd found during those 15 minutes back at her desk. She'd searched my name from the company directory, my married name. But search engines connect things. Within a few seconds, her screen filled with my other name, my published name, the name attached to 17 years of research. She showed him the book, the one assigned in her MBA program just last semester. She showed him the speaking engagements, the credentials, the university profile listing my current research project, systemic compliance failures in mid-sized organizations, a case study approach. Then she told him 3 things. 1. I was being deliberately isolated by my direct supervisor. 2. She had personally witnessed 6 ethics violations in just 3 days on the job, all matching patterns described in my published research. 3. If I was still gathering data after 6 months, the company was probably in serious trouble. Owen listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he made 3 calls. 1 to his assistant to schedule an emergency leadership meeting that evening. 1 to me, 1 to Brenda. He told neither of us what the meeting was about. I got the call at 4:30. I need you at a leadership meeting tonight. 6 p.m., 4th floor, come prepared. He didn't explain, just hung up after I agreed. I sat at my desk for a moment. Then I opened my documentation folder, reviewed everything one more time, and closed the laptop. I arrived at 5:50. The conference room held maybe 12 people, windows looking out over the city. Owen was already there along with his assistant, the head of HR, the CFO, and 2 senior team leads I'd never spoken to. Paige came in a few minutes later and sat near Owen. Brenda was at the far end of the table, arms folded, expression carefully neutral, but her shoulders were tight. She knew something was happening, she just didn't know what. When I walked in, her face shifted for just a second. Surprise, then something harder. "Why is he here?" she said to Owen. "He's not leadership. He's here because I invited him," Owen said. Simple as that. He turned to me. "Nolan, I understand you've been conducting research during your time here, research I approved 6 months ago. Tell us what you found." The room went quiet. Brenda straightened up. "What research? What are you talking about? You approved this?" Owen looked at her calmly. "I did, before I left for overseas. I briefed you directly in this building with Nolan sitting in the room." Her jaw tightened. "I thought he was just observing general patterns, not collecting evidence to use against us." "I don't collect evidence," I said. "I observe patterns. There's a difference. Every task you assigned me, every complaint you had me process, every safety report, every financial discrepancy, I completed all of it, accurately on time. And yes, I documented what I observed. That was always the point. You knew that on day one." She opened her mouth, closed it, then she tried a different angle. "He's been here under false pretenses. He had a hidden agenda from the start. My research project is publicly listed on my university profile," I said. "It's been there the whole time. Systemic compliance failures in mid-sized organizations. Nothing hidden about it." Owen leaned forward. "What did you find, Nolan?" I opened my laptop and turned it so the CFO and HR head could see the screen. 4 financial discrepancies. Timestamps, amounts, responsible parties. 2 safety violations that were formally reported through proper channels and then quietly shelved. 3 client contracts modified after signing. No documentation, no client notification. I paused. I selected the clearest examples of each pattern. Not everything I observed, just what was most documented and least deniable. The CFO shifted in his chair. "I've also prepared a summary that could go to OSHA regarding the safety violations, and to the SEC regarding the financial discrepancies." I kept my voice even. "I have not sent it. I came here tonight because I believe this organization can make a different choice." Brenda's hand came down flat on the table, not a slam, just firm. "That is a threat. You're blackmailing us." "No," I said. "I'm giving you the same choice I give every organization I study. Fix the problems before they hurt people, or don't. Either way, what I've documented doesn't change. The only thing that changes is how this company gets written about." Owen looked at Brenda. "You were in the room when I introduced Nolan. You shook his hand. You said his secret was safe with you." He paused. "What changed?" She didn't answer because nothing had changed except her fear of what I represented. Someone who could see through every performance. Someone who knew exactly what those shortcuts cost. Owen turned back to me. "What do you recommend?" I had 2 options in that moment. The first one was easy. I had names, dates, dollar amounts, incident reports. I could lay it all out right there and let the chips fall. End careers. Justify every ignored lunch, every meeting I wasn't invited to, every whispered warning about how difficult I was. 6 months of sitting alone in a room full of people, and I could burn it all down in about 20 minutes. The second option was harder, but it was the reason I'd spent 17 years doing this work in the first place. 6 training sessions, I said, 2 hours each. Mandatory attendance, every employee, every manager, every person in this room. I'll design and run them myself. No names named, no accusations. Just patterns and the cost of those patterns. Real scenarios drawn from what I observed here and from a dozen other organizations I've studied. The CFO looked at Owen and the OSHA and SEC summaries. If the company completes the training and implements corrective actions on the documented violations, those summaries stay in my files. They become background research for a chapter about an organization that saw itself clearly and decided to do something about it. Owen nodded slowly. He looked at the HR head, then the CFO. Neither of them pushed back. Then he stood up, walked to my end of the table, and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for giving us the chance to make the right call." We shook hands in front of everyone still in that room. Brenda sat at the far end of the table and said nothing. She gathered her things about 10 minutes later after the logistics were settled and walked out without a word. The next morning she submitted her resignation, effective immediately. No farewell email, no goodbye tour. Just a brief letter to Owen saying she was pursuing other opportunities. Nobody demanded it. Nobody forced it. She just finally understood what it would mean to stay, to sit in those training sessions week after week, knowing she was the pattern being described in every single one. The first session started 6 days later. Every employee, every manager, every team lead in the building. I opened with this. Here's a pattern I've seen in 38% of the workplaces I've studied. A manager isolates someone on their team because that person's knowledge is a threat to the manager's authority. The manager doesn't frame it that way, not even to themselves. They frame it as protecting the team from someone disruptive. Over time, the team loses access to information and expertise they didn't even know they were missing. Performance drops, and the manager points to the isolated person as the reason things aren't working. I watched people shift in their chairs. A few looked at each other. Nobody said anything out loud, but you could see the recognition moving through the room. Session 2 focused on complaint handling. Organizations often assign their most sensitive complaint processing to people they trust, but then those same people get labeled as someone who overreacts, who sees problems where there aren't any, who makes things complicated. So when that person escalates a concern, leadership discounts it. The trusted processor becomes the ignored processor. Meanwhile, the problems they were flagging keep growing. This pattern shows up in 62% of the organizations I've studied. After that session, 3 people came to find me privately. Real situations they'd been sitting on for months because they didn't think anyone would listen. I didn't give advice. I just asked questions and let them think through their options out loud. Word got around. By session 3, I had a waiting list of people who wanted to talk. Session 4 covered the financial discrepancies I'd documented. No names, no specific dollar figures from this company, just the pattern. Small irregularities that individually look like rounding errors or honest mistakes, but collectively point to a system where nobody is checking because everybody assumes somebody else already did. A guy named Reed from the finance team came up to me after that one. He'd been staring at his notebook the whole session. He said, "I flagged something 4 months ago, and my manager told me I'd misread the report." He hadn't misread anything. Session 5 covered the safety violations. 2 employees from the warehouse side of the operation sat in the front row and took notes the entire time. They stayed after to ask questions for 45 minutes. By the time session 6 came around, Owen and his entire leadership team were in the front row. I'd saved the most important pattern for last. 79% of failed organizations show this one. I said, a leader suppresses talent to protect their position. They usually don't think of themselves as doing that. They think they're maintaining stability, keeping the team focused, protecting people from disruption. But what they're actually doing is preventing the organization from growing. And organizations that stop growing start dying, not dramatically, slowly. The talented people leave first because they have options. Then performance drops. Then clients start noticing. Then it's too late to course correct. I let that sit for a moment. The question is never whether the leader intended harm. Most of them didn't. The question is whether the organization recognizes the pattern before it costs them too much to recover. I paused again. The good news is that recognition is a choice, and it's a choice that can be made at any point, including tonight. Brenda wasn't there for session 6. She hadn't been there for session 5 either, but Owen was, and when I finished, he was the first one to stand up. He didn't say anything, just started clapping. Slowly at first, then the rest of the room followed. I'm not going to pretend that didn't mean something after 6 months of eating lunch by myself. The corrective actions started the following week. The financial discrepancies were reviewed and reconciled with a third-party auditor. The safety violations were addressed and documented properly. The client contracts were flagged, clients were notified, and updated agreements were signed. Owen asked me again about Brenda's old position. Department manager, full authority, real money. I told him the same thing I'd said the week before. No, taking her job would have felt like revenge, and revenge was never the point. The point was always to show what the patterns cost and what it looks like when an organization decides to pay attention before those costs become permanent. What I accepted instead was a role as ethics advisor, part-time remote quarterly check-ins, enough involvement to make sure the changes actually stuck. Not so much that I became part of the system I was supposed to be studying from the outside. It was the right call. I knew at the moment I said yes. Paige was promoted to team lead within a month of Brenda leaving. I want to be clear about something, that wasn't a consolation prize. Owen didn't promote her because she'd done him a favor by walking into his office that afternoon. He promoted her because in the 6 weeks since the training sessions ended, she'd already changed how the department operated. She started weekly knowledge-sharing sessions where anyone could bring a problem they were stuck on and work through it with the group. She made project assignments visible to everyone, posted on a shared board, with clear notes on why each person was chosen for each task. For the first time in that department, people understood how decisions were being made. That sounds like a small thing, it isn't. Other departments started requesting the training. Owen approved it. Over the next 4 months, I delivered versions of those 6 sessions to every team in the building. Each time, the same thing happened. People recognized patterns, not in other people, in themselves. And most of them, given the chance and the framework, chose to do something about it. That last part still surprises me a little even after 17 years. Ride from finance flagged 2 more discrepancies after the training that he'd been sitting on because he wasn't sure anyone would take him seriously. Both were addressed. One of them turned out to be significant enough that it would have created real legal exposure within a year if it had stayed buried. He got a formal commendation from Owen. He told me afterward he'd almost quit 3 months earlier because he felt like the company didn't actually want to know the truth. That's what this kind of isolation costs, not just the person being isolated, the people around them who start to believe that raising their hand is pointless. The book came out 4 months after I left the full-time role. Chapter 7 is about this company, not as a cautionary tale, not as an example of what went wrong, as proof that an organization can look at itself honestly and decide to become better. Real patterns, real corrective actions, no names, no identifying details. An advance copy went to a professor who teaches organizational psychology at a university in the Northeast. She emailed me the week before publication. She's assigning the book in her spring semester. She called Chapter 7 the most useful case study she'd encountered in 15 years of teaching. This, she wrote, is what transformation actually looks like. Not dramatic, not overnight. Just steady, honest work by people who decided the truth was worth more than their comfort. I forwarded that email to Owen. He replied with 2 words. Thank you. About 3 weeks later, he texted me again. One line, Q3 numbers are up 11% compared to Q3 last year. Thought you'd want to know. I texted back. I'm not surprised. I could see it coming from month 2. He sent back a laughing emoji. First time I'd seen that from him. That was enough. Last month, I stopped by the office for a quarterly check-in. People I'd eaten lunch alone near for 6 months greeted me by name, asked about the research, told me about situations they'd handled differently because of something from the training sessions. Dana, the woman who'd once told me not to take Brenda's warnings personally, stopped me in the hallway and said she'd referred a friend at another company to my book because they were dealing with the same patterns. Before I left, Paige pulled me aside. We hired someone new last week, she said. First day, I sent a message to the whole team. She paused. I told them, questions are always welcome here, especially the difficult ones. She looked at me for a second. That came from watching you sit alone for 6 months and keep doing the work anyway. Keep asking questions nobody wanted to hear. You showed us that difficult doesn't mean wrong. It usually means necessary. I think about those 6 words a lot. The ones Brenda used to whisper to every new hire who walked through the door, stay away from him. He's difficult. She meant them as a warning, as a way to protect herself from someone who could see what she didn't want seen. But that's the thing about trying to silence someone who actually knows what they're looking at. You can make them eat lunch alone. You can make sure nobody listens to them in meetings. You can make an entire department believe they're the problem, but you can't change what they see. And eventually someone else sees it too. If you've ever been the person everyone was warned about, the one labeled difficult before anyone actually worked with you, the one whose ideas got dismissed because of who was doing the dismissing and not what was actually being said, then you already know everything I'm talking about. You don't need me to explain it. What I'll say is this. The work matters. Keep doing it. Keep documenting. Keep showing up. The people who try to silence you are counting on you to eventually decide it isn't worth it. Don't give them that. And if you've been on the other side of this, if you've ever passed along a warning about someone without checking whether it was true, it's worth asking yourself why. Not to feel bad about it, just to understand the pattern, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the whole point. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me if you've been the person everyone was warned about, or if you've ever been the one doing the warning. Hit, like if you believe people and organizations can actually change, and subscribe, because these stories need to be heard, the uncomfortable ones, the ones that show us exactly who we are and who we still have time to become. Thanks for listening.